Wasatch Report, shooting straight on everything from prepping to politics.
Welcome, everybody, to the Wasatch Report. I'm your host for the next hour, Suzanne Sherman, here on the Cerberus Radio Network, where we defend freedom and liberty from the flames of tyranny. Jeff Johnson is manning the control panels here. He'll be joining in with us shortly. It is February 21st, year of our Lord 2019. You can follow us on Facebook.com/Cerberus Radio Network. Our fan page, CRN, also on Facebook. Please follow us on SoundCloud, YouTube. You can download, share, follow, subscribe, do all the above. Tell your friends. This is how we grow an audience, ladies and gentlemen. We can't do it without you. Again, big, hearty thanks to those that are doing so, and a big welcome to the new listeners we have, new members of our fan club. It's really exciting to see the little network that maybe thinks it can starting to do it. Really excited about our prospects here. We've got some new talent coming in. I had a long conversation with somebody yesterday. He's going to be joining and having a very well-produced weekly podcast, and that will be addition to our lineup, and a lot of other things, really cool stuff coming on up. So I'm glad that you're with us today. And Jeff, I am finally solving my winter issues out here. If you remember, I've been stranded down here. Last week we had snow drifts that completely covered my driveway. This snow was cold. We had a bit of a melt off out here in the Wasatch back. Bit of a melt off followed by a freeze, which is always fun this time of year. So my entire yard becomes an ice rink, and what snow I have turns into concrete. Had to get a Caterpillar with the snowblower out here and dig my driveway. Sunday, I happily marched that truck out of here and went to Park City, had my workout. Monday, I tried to go. Truck won't make it up the hill. What in the heck is going on here? So I had kind of a pity party, stayed home a couple days, and ordered some new tires and a new battery for my other vehicle, my Subaru, which are great for out here. But I decided, because the weather's so bad and we've got more storms coming in, let's just take care of that as well. Well, I got the call that said, hey, we've got your stuff down here. So I thought I'd try and get the truck out one more time. And Jeff, you're going to love this, because got my truck stuck in the snow yet again. This after falling down hard on the ice and said, I can't dig. Tried to dig, can't get the truck out. We're stuck uphill. I call a tow truck. This is how much I love my community. The guy's out here within about 20 minutes. Gets me out of the snow, facing up in the driveway now. Says, okay, drive on out. Hit the gas, spins, nothing happening. Put your truck in four-wheel drive. Now, before everybody laughs at me and thinks that I had my truck in two-wheel drive, the light was on. It said 4 low, okay? Well, had an electronic issue, so got the truck back down here, unplugged, plugged the battery back in, truck's back in business. I also, Jeff, I have to confess to you, I've never changed a tire before yesterday. One of my friends in my community came up, brought my tires from the car store yesterday, and he put a new battery in the car for me and showed me I changed 4 tires, and I'm very proud of myself. I think that's a roadside skill people need to have in their toolbox. And if you don't have that, trust me on this one, there's enough going on. If you've never done it before, you want to do it when you're not on the side of the road at night or under miserable or stressful conditions. Just like I tell everybody about being prepared, you want to learn this stuff before you are under the stress of a situation where it is no longer optional, but it is mandatory to get that tire changed. Any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, actually I do, because I was going to say, our society today, and you know what? I've fallen prey to it. For all my life, I would crawl under my vehicles and change my own oil. You know what? I take it to the shop and have them change the oil now. And I think as a society, we've pretty much come to that. And for most people, they have roadside service. So if they get a flat tire, they call somebody to come out and change their tire. We've really gotten to this point where we aren't very self-sufficient anymore, are we? And so where I was going with this was, if any of you dads out there listening that have little girls, take them out there, teach them how to change their oil. If you don't know, you better learn too, because that way you know how, and then you can teach your daughter how to do it. Teach her how to change flats. You know, this is, if things go wrong and people can't get to you to help you, you know, it's a good idea to be able to get yourself out of those problems. I'm back to you, Suzanne.
Well, think how vulnerable. You made a great point when you said, dads, teach your daughters. Not only is it important to teach them how to shoot, but, you know, we don't think about this stuff. And I remember a conversation I had with my dad. He said, I need to teach you how to change a tire. And I just smirked and laughed it off and said, I just keep a bikini top in the, in the glove compartment. How stupid is that? How dumb is it to think that you can put yourself out there and look sexy, you know, as a teenager, and look sexy and get somebody to help you? I would submit to you that the absolute worst person, the last one on the list that you want to help you, is the one that's going to stop if you're dressed like that. You know, it was a stupid thing to say, but I know a lot of young women think that just because of their looks, they will get men to stop, pull over, and help them. This mentality, as stupid as it was for me, is very common. Ladies, I don't care what you look like. Learn how to do this yourself. Your life may actually depend on it. It might even be, well, I'm just going to be on Interstate 80 or go from one place to another. You got to know how to do this. And I'm embarrassed it took me so long to learn, but I'm real, folks. I'm not pretending to be something I'm not out here. If there's a shortcoming in my preps and you can learn from it, I'm going to share it with you. Should I share my other one, Jeff, what I don't have in my medical preparedness kits that I realize I need?
Go ahead.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, go ahead.
So the other day I fell on the ice out here, landed hard on the part I should land on because it has the most, shall we say, cushion, but also, unfortunately, on both my wrists. When I fall off a horse, I've ridden horses all my life. I have this instinct, I know, to tuck my arms into my chest and not to break myself, you know, not to try to break my fall. When you're falling backwards and it's not expected, it's a really tough thing to do. And I failed to do it. And yesterday I fell again, trying to open the lid or the hood for my truck with one hand because my left hand is hurt and I could barely get it lifted. And I reached for the cattle guard I have and I missed and I landed on said caboose again and my wrist. So winter out here is hard. In fact, my friend that came up from town, did you meet Tegan when you were here?
No, I don't believe so.
He's actually the first friend we made when we went to Walmart in Park City. He was working at the sports desk there. He was the first friend we made, probably our closest friends. He is his dad, his wife, his mom. They support me. They're helpful. When we get an elk, I bring them some meat. His grandmother loves the liver. So I always make sure we pack that up and bring it to them. But this is what we were talking about, community the other day, Jeff, about helping each other out. So anyway, I forgot where I was going with mentioning him, but he came out here and helped me out. And it was just a great feeling. And I told him, I feel like I am not cut out to live here. Maybe this was a bad decision. And he lived in this little place in Colville his whole life, same house. And he said, no, you absolutely are. Everybody right now is feeling this. Everybody's sick of winter. We've had it. His wife said, yeah, I'm so over this. And we ain't done yet, folks. So, what did I do? I just got new tires, got the Subaru. So now I have 2 functioning vehicles that will get me out of here. So probably.
Yeah, Ed in the chat said he's so over the snow. So, when you were talking about the snow a little earlier, and see, if you folks out there listening, if you're listening on YouTube, if you're in the live chat, if you say something, more than likely it'll end up on air. So just saying. Yeah.
If you hear something, say something. And I forgot to promote our YouTube chat. Folks, listen to us on YouTube. Join our live chat. I'm really pleased with the group we have. And we have such great listeners. I so appreciate that they show up here and they listen to us. Yesterday, I was talking about how, excuse me, the market is so saturated, so many podcasts, so many people have subscriptions they've already paid for. We're not asking for money here, folks. We're just asking for your support and to share, and that you take the time. When you spend time on something, you never get it back. You spend money on something, you can earn more. That time is gone. And we have people that consistently take time out of their day to listen to us. It is such an honoring and also a humbling experience. So again, thank you very much. Jeff, tell me. Good on you for learning
what
that.
did you find was not in your prep bag?
Oh, well, yeah, I forgot about that.
But you didn't tell them.
Oh, that's right. This is so stupid, but you don't realize how much you're going to need something until you don't have it. And I might have some somewhere, but it wasn't in the, I took a food bucket and put a bunch of supplies in there. And I realized my supplies were mostly geared towards laceration, injuries involving blood. I have tourniquets, I have gauze, I have Israeli bandages, and so on and so forth. But yes, what I really would have appreciated would be a nice ace bandage to wrap my wrist with, and I didn't have one. So today I'm going to head down to Park City. I'll hit the probably good old Walmart, get some ace bandages and also some bird seed for my poor little birds out here. The feeder got knocked down in the snow, and they do this every year. They show up thinking it's springtime, and Utah has a surprise for them, just like it does for us. So we're going to try and help out these little guys. Oh, by the way, there was a nice bull elk lying down on the end of the road in our neighbor's pile of hay. So everybody's hungry out here. Nobody's happy. That being said, where do you want to start today, Jeff? We had a little bit of a conference call before the show and had some stuff to take care of. I want to maybe follow up. Oh, we have, here's a good one we can start with. The judicial temple monkeys, the black robe messiahs, have issued an opinion. And just like they did with the case in Colorado, where they told the Colorado State Board that they acted unconstitutionally with how they handled the issue with the gay couple and the baker who refused to provide a message that was about, pro-gay marriage. The Kennedy said, look, if you approach this in a manner that does not discriminate against religion, wink, wink, in fact, telling the board how to discriminate against the Christian baker, we're going to uphold your ruling. But until you do this in a manner that doesn't appear, wink, wink, to discriminate against the religious beliefs of the baker, we're going to say you cannot behave this way. So he gave them the keys to the kingdom, I like to say, and said, here's how you discriminate. And people thought this was really a victory. And it isn't. When we have 9 unappointed, unaccountable, politically connected lawyers, black robe messiahs, handing down the law of the land for over 320 million people, folks, that is not freedom. That is not a Republican form of government. That is a version, essentially, of parliamentary sovereignty. A war was fought to get over that. So everybody's celebrating now. I'm going to read an article. There are a few of them out here. There's one from USA Today, and then maybe I'll get into the analysis from FEE. Also, Jeff Deist from Mises.org weighed in. So when guys like Tom Mullen from FEE, Freedom of Economic Foundation for Economic Education, Jeff Deist from Mises.org are all saying that this is not a good thing, Jeff, we're in good company, okay? So if you're of the opinion that this is a good thing, just stand by, listen to what we have to say. This is an article out of USA Today. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously Wednesday that states cannot impose excessive fees, fines, and forfeitures as criminal penalties. The decision, which united the court's conservatives and liberals. See, this is the thing that, and I referred to a phone survey that I had the other day. Remember, Jeff, I got a call, and they said, we'd like to know, how do you consider yourself politically? Are you conservative, liberal, or I forgot what the other choice was. Maybe he said independent. But I said, conservative doesn't have a term that I can answer here, because conservatives and liberals are all big government. When you see how their positions are being sold today? I can't answer that question. He goes, okay, you just did. So that's the problem with these surveys. They use these numbers, they ask the questions in a mean by that doesn't really reflect reality. Remember, polls, by the way, had Hillary Clinton winning the 2016 election in a landslide. So I don't put a lot of faith in those, and I try never to answer those. So getting back to the article, the decision united the court's conservatives and liberals, makes clear that the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against excessive fines applies to states and localities as well as the federal government. Ooh, I think everybody who knows me knows where I'm going to be going with this one. Apparently Ginsburg is back from the taxidermist. Associate Justice.
Yeah, I saw that the other day. Someone had a meme with her standing in her big long coat, replacing her in her robe. It was kind of funny looking.
That was a quick turnaround. It took me a year to get my 2017 buck deer on the wall. Okay, so anyway, that was a tad disrespectful, wasn't it? Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, just back in court this week after lung cancer surgery, wrote the majority opinion. No, she did not. Her clerks wrote it, and they probably held her hand when the pen scratched the opinion. Wrote the majority opinion.
They woke her up to sign it.
Right. I don't even think they had to do that. The protection against excessive fines guards against abuses of government's punitive or criminal law enforcement authority, she wrote, quoting in part from the court's ruling in 2010. Oh, I love this one. That Second Amendment gun rights apply to the states. Oh my God, what a bunch of garbage. She said,
I got to interrupt because I just have this picture in my mind that's just too funny. So here's Ginsburg in her office, and they write the majority opinion for her, and they get the defibrillator out. Clear. Say her, sign this. They have the defibrillator and bring her back to life to sign these things. I'm sorry. It was just a picture that came in my mind, and I just started laughing about it.
You almost had to take over the show because I don't know what would have happened if this coffee made it to my keyboard, but it's the closest I've gotten. Yeah. So here we go. We said we're going to pick this apart. So the protection against, so quoting now back to the Second Amendment. Boy, you derailed my train of thought, but that was so.
I'm sorry. I'm still sitting here laughing about it.
I know. Wake her up. Okay. Okay. Citing the court's ruling in 2010 that the Second Amendment gun rights apply to the states, she said, this safeguard we hold is fundamental to our scheme of ordered tyranny. I'm sorry. She said liberty, but what they really mean is fundamental to our system of ordered tyranny, because that's exactly what this crap is. Tyranny coming from the top down, from 9 politically connected black robe messiahs. They're nothing but lawyers, folks. They had a good year in torts, sat before, clerked for a federal judge, somehow made it in the little club here, and now they're up to this again, decreeing what the law of the land is going to be for the entire continental landmass. I'm going to go through this article, then we'll pick it apart a little bit more. It was a victory for Tyson Timbs, who sold less than $400 worth of heroin. Again, all this crap comes from the stupid drug wars we have. Are you saying heroin should be legal? Well, we can address that. What has been the benefit versus the cost of these drug wars? And how else can we approach fighting this? How about personal responsibility? If you can't keep drugs out of your system and they're debilitating, you're either going to die or you're going to get over it and make some good choices. Oh, but it's a disease. You're so heartless. No, it's not a disease. It's a bad decision. When you say this is a disease, that's really disrespectful to people with Parkinson's or cancer or real diseases. Okay, let's move on from that. So it was a victory for Tyson Timbs, who sold less than $400 worth of heroin to undercover police officers in 2013. Upon conviction, Indiana seized his Land Rover, which he had purchased for more than $42,000 with the proceeds of his father's life insurance policy. that seizure will be considered by the Indiana courts. Liberals and libertarians alike have groused for years about what they see as increasingly greedy governments. Yeah, no kidding. We're the Republicans on this one. They love their law enforcement. They love this stuff. A study by Harvard University and the National Institute of Justice found that 10 million people owe more than $50 billion as a result of fines, fees, and forfeitures. Many of the fines and forfeitures are contested and reduced. The court's ruling could cut down on their imposition in the first place. State and local governments increasingly use funds collected as a criminal and civil fines to pay for municipal services. Let me take a break here. Do you not see a fundamental conflict of interest here? When it benefits you to arrest people, get them in the criminal justice system, call this civil asset forfeiture, take what they have, and by calling it civil, you can escape and elude due process, it is profitable. When we study to become lawyers, we have to take an ethics class, believe it or not. And we are told we have to avoid even the appearance of an impropriety. If this is not going way beyond the appearance of an impropriety, when they financially benefit from these confiscations, and in this case here, this guy showed where he got the Range Rover from, he's going to have to spend thousands to get this back. Many people realize it's not worth the cost of it to get their property back. They do have to hire attorneys, and the money just goes straight to the arresting agencies. This whole system is stacked against them. I seriously doubt you're going to get appointed a criminal defense attorney to get your civil asset forfeiture back. You're on your own for that. And now it's saying here that they use this money for services. So now the government agencies that have arrested you and stolen your resources use those resources to buy more votes. This tyranny is a rust that permeates every level of our society, not just Washington, D.C. Yes, we do not want civil asset forfeiture reigning out of control, but we don't want to take what is seen as a victory as more power going to Washington, D.C. Personally, the baker in Colorado had a victory. He benefited. Personally, the gentleman here had a victory. He benefited. Mr. Timms, Tyson Timms. Who lost? Everyone else. Because more power, once again, has been sucked into the black hole of the black robes, which again is going to be a delegation of power by implication to Washington, D.C. Let me get back to the article. So again, where I left off was the state and local governments increasingly use these funds to collect criminal cases to pay for municipal services, meaning bribe the voters. 100 cities with the highest proportion of revenue from fines and fees in 2012 financed 7% to 30% of their budgets this way, according to the ACLU. Imposing monetary penalties that bury people under mountains of accumulating debt has devastating consequences on individuals, families, and entire communities, particularly low-income communities of color. The practice often leads, this is at the end of the quote now, the practice often leads low-income defendants further into poverty, crime, prison, recidivism. That's the liberal Southern Poverty Law Center. Again, you might not like the source, but what they're saying is absolutely accurate. And the Libertarian Cato Institute, they also argued in the court papers for abolishing this and limiting this behavior. The American Bar Association noted that nearly 2/3 of prisoners have little prospect of paying the fines and fees after their release. Tim's conviction resulted in a year's home detention, 5 years probation, $1,200 in fees, but it was the seizure of his SUV that led to the lawsuit, the 2012 Land Rover. Those things ain't cheap, folks. I would love one of those. Not happening. The Land Rover, the LR2, was even named a plaintiff in the case. Wesley Hoddett is a senior attorney with the Institute for Justice who argued this case before the Supreme Court, said the ruling should go a long way to curtailing what is often called policing for profit. Police and prosecutors employ forfeiture to take someone's property, sell it, and keep the profits to fund their departments. This is egregiously unethical, in my opinion. Going back to Hoddett's quote, he said, this gives them a direct, see, it's not just me, folks, other people say the same thing. This gives them a direct financial incentive to abuse this power and impose excessive fines. Brianne Gord, who's chief counsel at the Liberal Constitutional Accountability Center, said significantly, this case has united progressives and conservatives, both advocates and the justices themselves, in a shared understanding, this is good, of the original meaning of the Constitution. So here we have so-called self-proclaimed constitutional experts claiming what the original meaning is of the Constitution, just like Scalia did in Heller, and screwing it all up. Jeff, please tell me the original meaning of the Constitution, were the Bill of Rights intended to apply to the states?
Well, again, here's where a lot of people have gotten it wrong. They somehow think that the Constitution is a book of laws, when in fact it is a blueprint. It's a blueprint for a government. That's all it is. I mean, I know there's a supremacy clause, but that's just in pursuance of what the blueprint was. It's not applying law to the states. Now, I know the courts created the 14th Amendment, magical, what is it, Suzanne? I just drew a blank. The incorporation doctrine.
Right.
So they created this out of thin air. And again, that's what the court does. It creates everything out of thin air.
And let's clarify that statement really quick, because we have the 14th Amendment, which according to its debates and ratification records, and I don't think there is any more clear example of the difference between constitutional history and constitutional law, which I say in law school is aptly called con law, because it is a con, it's all a lie, as the 14th Amendment. I like to refer people to, I even know the episode number, I've used it so many times, episode 444 of the Tom Woods podcast with Kevin Gutzman, and they discuss the original meaning, what I think it's called, what was the 14th Amendment intended to do. Anyway, but you can find it. If you search Gutzman Woods, episode 444, Tom Woods podcast, it is right there, 14th Amendment. It was intended to do no more than constitutionalize the 1868 Civil Rights Act, which in turn granted basic rights of citizenship to the freed blacks. It was actually, when it was proposed, John Sherman, brother of William Tecumseh Sherman, no relation to that war criminal, I always say, he told his constituents in Ohio that it wouldn't even affect, the 14th Amendment wouldn't even affect the citizens in the northern states, because this is a funny one, they didn't discriminate against blacks. We'll get into that. Never mind, blacks weren't even allowed to move into places like Illinois or Oregon. But we have this whole lie about racism being just part of the Southern culture and heritage. That's something we'll cover on another episode. So we know the information is out there, what the 14th Amendment was intended to do. It was never intended, and we're taught this in school. Constitutional history, we're taught this on U.S. government. We have our 3 branches of government. We're taught what the Bill of Rights are. The 10th Amendment grants the states police powers. That's how it was taught to me. And then we're told, well, the 14th Amendment applied magically the Bill of Rights to all the states. And isn't that a good thing? Now the states can't discriminate against religion or inhibit your right to free speech or your right to keep and bear arms, your constitutional rights. And this is all a lie. States had their own constitutions in effect when they ratified the Constitution, the General Constitution of 1787. So this is all unnecessary. Not only that, Antonin Scalia in McDonald versus City of Chicago even said, I have my misgivings of substantive due process, but I am going to acquiesce and apply the Second Amendment to the states. This was a case that was referred to earlier in this article. There's no constitutional history supporting this interpretation. It's just a power grab by a Supreme Court justice who, interestingly enough, took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. But to them, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was listening to you.
Oh, I thought I heard you talking. So they're supposed to uphold and defend the Constitution, but what they do is simply reapply it in a manner that is consistent, not with the constitutional intent as described during the ratification debates, but as consistent with their personal policy preference and desired outcomes. So that's how we have this. And they use the same thing as long as it's entrenched in our system of order, liberty. And they make it seem like if we don't apply this nationally, we're going to have absolute chaos. In fact, we have a good friend that he's really starting to change his views, but I was on an afternoon radio show and he said, how are we going to know what the law of the land is without the Supreme Court? And I said, what makes you think that's a representative form of government when we have 9 lawyers saying what the law is for over 320 million people? That's precisely why we have fighting in the streets, ladies and gentlemen. So again, the protection against, this is what Ginsburg writes, against excessive fines has been a constant shield throughout Anglo-American history. You know what, lady? So has the 10th Amendment, and we just seem to forget that. She also says exorbitant tolls undermine other constitutional liberties. Excessive fines can be used to retaliate against or kill or chill the speech of political enemies. I agree with these sentiments she has wholeheartedly. The problem is she is wrong on the constitutional application, and her understanding, her analysis, or should I say her court clerk's analysis is flawed because she's applying the 8th Amendment to the states in direct contravention to the intent of the Constitution as ratified. So again, and the state, and where this happened, the state Supreme Court said, no, it doesn't apply because the 8th Amendment was never intended to apply to the state. So the state court was actually correct. So this really boils down to an issue of jurisdiction. What is the format in which you seek proper redress? And unfortunately, when you roll the dice with the Supreme Court, they could have ruled the other way. What happens if you take your victory laps, but what happens someday when the Supreme Court, now eventually packed by progressives or conservatives, could be the same, rule against us? Well, gee, I don't know. We've got over 60 million babies that have been aborted because the states now are afraid to stand up to 9 lawyers. 7 ruled for Roe versus Wade. 7 out of 9. And they were Republicans, by the way. Well, 46 years ago, some lawyers said that we couldn't make this illegal in our state. So we're going to kowtow. We're going to bend over and say, we don't have the temerity to say this is not justice, this is not right. And we're going to let this opinion, never mind we've overruled opinions before. Dred Scott, they did away with that one. Plessy versus Ferguson, we fixed that one. We had cases Bauer v. Hardwick, and then let's see, and then I forgot Texas, not Texas v. White, but there was a case that said homosexual sodomy could be outlawed, I mean. But the Supreme Court later reversed that and said, no, 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 you cannot ban it. So we have states standing up for marijuana use and effectively nullifying federal law. We have the gays getting their right to sodomy, but nobody wants to stand up for the unborn. So this is what happens again when we put all our faith and trust in the Supreme Court. We really don't have justice. I'm going to just also really share the Fee article on this as well, that also again says how the Supreme Court ruled Wednesday unanimously that the state and local governments are subject to constitutional prohibitions on excessive fines. The decision will provide Americans robust constitutional protection against exorbitant fines imposed by local governments. Again, this is not a good thing. And again, the ruling here, they say, is a big win for property rights, as civil asset forfeiture is a widespread and unjust practice that often affects the most vulnerable members of society. Tom Mullen, also from Fee, goes into why this is a bad idea. This author here disappointingly seems to support this and think that it is a good idea. Again, these states are not subject to the Eighth Amendment. The Bill of Rights was never intended. We've done many shows on this topic for that one. So I think that's enough for that topic. Jeff, what do you say here? That's taken most of the show.
I'm sorry, Suzanne. We have a problem with Radio Co. It must have dropped. So I was busy trying to reconnect us here.
Oh,
so
that's okay.
I just got a message that it dropped, I think. So,
okay.
Sorry.
Are we back now?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure that out right now.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go to another Supreme Court decision because I'm kind of flying solo today with you at the controls, which is awesome. So these are some things I've been wanting to get into recently. And with our Wake Up Cerberus, where we've had 4 or 5 hosts on, I haven't been able to really get into this. So here is another story. This is on the website from the Pacific Legal Foundation. The Supreme Court's going to decide whether the Clean Water Act regulates groundwater. And, you know, Jeff, whenever we do this, I know you're busy right now working with Radio Co., but I always ask you, please point to the part of the Constitution. We can make it easy. Look in Article 1, Section 8, that says the general government has the power to regulate water, groundwater, water, or otherwise. So the Supreme Court agreed to hear County of Maui versus Hawaii Wildlife Fund. Now, I'm seeing here something that is really local to state of Hawaii, but now we have the Supreme Court examining this case. Let's continue. The case is about whether the Clean Water Act, which I will tell you right now is unconstitutional, regulates pollution that reaches surface water by means of groundwater. If it does, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said then every homeowner with a septic tank could be subject to harsh treatment from agency bureaucrats. Congress has never asked federal agencies to regulate all pollution everywhere in the country. In the case of groundwater pollution, local governments have been empowered to regulate and enforce discharges from things like, septic tanks or lawn fertilizers. The scope of the Clean Water Act has been a contentious and controversial issue for decades. But for most of that time, the focus has been on surface waters, lakes, streams, ponds, and marshes, which are subject to federal regulation, and which they're saying are subject to federal regulation. My goodness, that's a tricky sentence. And which should the states regulate? I can answer both of those questions. Part 1 of that sentence, which are subject to federal regulation, none of them are. And which of these aspects should the states regulate? All of them. Let me continue. Without a doubt, the Clean Water Act has done a great deal of good and cleaning our waterways, but abuse by enforcement agencies has also harmed many Americans and led to serious controversy about the law. Under the Ninth Circuit's decision, which the Supreme Court has now agreed to review, the Clean Water Act's controversy would greatly expand. If groundwater pollution can be regulated, virtually all homeowners and farmers in the nation, that's their N-word, not mine, could be forced to pay massive fines and lose the ability to use their property. We hope that the Supreme Court reverses the Ninth Circuit and confirms Congress's decision to leave groundwater regulation to state and local governments to address. This is my issue with these so-called legal experts. The Pacific Legal Foundation, and many of these, there was also recently somebody was discussing a case that, again, this is another so-called legal expert deferring to the authority of the Supreme Court to weigh in on issues over which the general government never had authority. And what's really frustrating is the people that analyze these stories, these issues in such a manner are doing such a tremendous disservice, yet they have the biggest following. I feel, Jeff, like we're the ones on that little dandelion trying to say, we are here, we are here, we are here. And we're doing our best to try and get the truth out. So let's acknowledge this. This is the Pacific Legal Foundation acknowledging the legitimacy of a blatantly unconstitutional act of Congress, the Clean Water Act. And here they even say the Clean Water Act has done a great deal of good in cleaning our waterways. What any of these foundations, what all of them should be doing is attacking outright the illegitimate nature of these acts and the role the federal judiciary plays in enforcing them. So now we have a case that can go to the Supreme Court. Again, what did I say about rolling the dice with the black robed messiahs? What if they say that septic tanks are now subject to the control of the Clean Water Act? We know how septic tanks work. We have these things called leach fields. So if you have property with a septic tank and you roll the dice with the Supreme Court and they rule against people like us that have them, imagine what we can be subject to. The fines, not being able to use our property, farmers maybe being shut down for the fertilizers they use. Folks, you think this new Green Deal we haven't already paved the way for it? People are laughing about it, but mark my words, it's coming. We're going to do a whole show where I pick this whole thing apart. I don't have time to get into it today, but they've already laid the groundwork for this thing. Jeff, how do you think this is going to, are you able to talk now?
I am. We are back live. Those of you that are listening on Radio Co., we are back live. You're not listening to a previous episode about avalanches. So what was your question? I'm sorry.
Well, here we have Hawaii's, we have some rules in Hawaii about groundwater, and an issue before the Supreme Court is whether or not the Clean Water Act regulates pollution that reaches surface water by means of groundwater. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has said that every homeowner with a septic tank could be subject to harsh treatment from the bureaucrats. So now this is going to go up to the Supreme Court. Imagine if they say that our septic tanks are now subject to the Clean Water Act because that water can eventually reach the surface. And everybody wants clean water, but at what cost? And are septic tanks polluting the water any more than other uses and chemicals that we have out there right now? Again, I think this is a huge overreach by the Supreme Court, and we're going to take a big risk if they rule against us. They've asserted authority over. I tell them, where has the federal government not asserted their authority? Here's another example. More.
I mean, we've had septic systems for decades, maybe 100 years. I don't know when they first started doing these, but the fact of the matter is they leach into the ground. It's just like anything else. Water will leach down in the ground, and it'll if the sand filters it. I mean, whatever. It's just typical. You can't collect rainwater. You can't have a septic system. You can't. We're free. Seriously, we're free. That's a rhetorical question because we're not.
I found an article, and I want to get into this, and we're going to wrap up the show with the contentious nature, of society right now. We are seeing so many attacks on legitimate attacks for kids wearing Trump hats, the MAGA hats. And we're also seeing fake attacks, little personal false flags. And in the case of this guy, Jesse Smollett, I've never heard of him before, and I've never heard of that show Empire. He's actually surrendering, facing felony charges because of this whole lie and this whole setup. We saw a lie about an attack. Nathan Phillips played the victim when I discussed that on the episode the other day about punching up. He could have picked his fight with the people that were actually taunting him, the Black Hebrews, but he would have had that drum probably put over his head. Instead, he punched up and went after those that were not going to hurt him and be no threat. There's an article here by the Federalist saying it is time for the United States to divorce before things get dangerous. We talk about this all the time, but I like to share these articles again as they come out so you can see the perspectives of others. And I will say that this is from 2018, April. But again, I like to have these because here's what I did, Jeff. When I started looking about the attack on a kid with the MAGA hat, because we just had one where a Vans employee, this kid was selling shoes. Somebody pulled a gun on a kid with the MAGA hat. So I did a query. Kid gets gun pulled on him for MAGA hat Vans. Just item after item after item. I'll read a few. Man wearing pro-Trump hat has gun pulled on him. Guy arrested after allegedly pulling gun on a couple wearing MAGA hats. MAGA hat wearing couple flipped off, gun pulled on. Tennessee man pulls gun on MAGA hat wear. On and on. Man pulls gun on Sam's Club customer wearing MAGA hat. Man accused of pulling gun on victim. I mean, this is all over. Jeff, I know people say if you don't wear your MAGA hat, then the other side is won. I don't have one. I don't put my faith in any king that is walking this earth right now. But if you want to, you should be able to. But then you have to also look at the PERSEC, side of things, personal security, OPSEC, operational security. Do you really want to set yourself up for violence when we have this climate right now? So it's really something that we go ahead.
We talk about it. We talk about, for those of you that are new to this network, because we've had a whole bunch of new people start following us, and I'm hoping you're listening. This show, Suzanne loves to talk about prepping and politics. So here we get back into a little bit of prepping, and there's in the prepping world, there's a concept called being the gray man. Wearing the MAGA hat, you ain't the gray man. You're right out there, bold and in everyone's face. Wearing a Ron John surf shot hat, you are now the gray man. Everyone just looks at you and go, "Oh, that's a surfer dude." So this is getting right back into your purse. But I'm sorry I interrupted, but I wanted to get that gray man in there.
It's fun because we've had so many people on with us this past week or two that you haven't gotten to play a role very much on this. So it's just you and me today. And I think also Junk Bond's gone for the next 2 weeks. So we're going to have a lot of time for this kind of interaction, and I'm looking forward to this. Here's one of my favorite statements. And again, for those of you that think that just getting back to the Constitution is going to save us, we've already discussed how those that are supposed to take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution don't even understand it themselves. And the document was pretty flippin' simple. It was not that hard to understand, but we have to look at the two forces behind this. Those, we go back to the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists, who were really the nationalists and the Federalists. Some wanted a strong central government. Well, once they got it, they started down the road to get that strong central government, even though it was rejected outright at Philadelphia. I say that all the time. So we fast forward now have the 1861 version of America, which again was rejected, but we can thank Lincoln. But here's another document that I think we really need to turn our focus to. And as we have this show, we're going to explain, like what I did today was try to explain to you, here's our system, here's our concept of ordered liberty, and here is how the court is interpreting it, always balancing. We'll get little snippets of victory like we had in the civil asset forfeiture case, or a seeming one in Heller, or seeming one with the Colorado case. But ultimately, who's the victor? It's always going to be the general government, because they give more power to themselves. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, that's what we should be focusing on. How do we separate from these people? And it's not just from Washington, D.C., folks. Tyranny, as we see, is at every level. We talked about it yesterday when a neighbor called the police because a little boy was selling hot chocolate in his own driveway. We have neighbors calling police, or we have landscaping companies calling police because teenagers seeking to make money are mowing their neighbors' lawns like they always used to. This is what they did to earn money. But landscapers have to pay for their business permits, so they don't want the competition. This article here, written by Jesse Kelly, says divorce is hard, but it's easier than cutting the brake lines on your wife's car. It's long past time for amicable divorce of the United States of America. There's simply no common ground with the left anymore. We are now the couple screaming at each other all night, every night, as the kids hide in their room. Again, a kid wearing a MAGA hat gets his hat taken off of him, a drink thrown at him. People are getting beat up. Where then on the other side, they're making up these assaults. Again, this guy from Empire, Jesse Smollett, again, I never heard of him before, but now he's famous. Is facing felony charges, and I bet you he will not spend 1 minute in custody. Oh, and he's got his show, by the way. I guess they renewed his show, but look at what happened to Roseanne Barr. So we have two sets of laws. We have people screaming for equality, but demanding superiority for themselves at the expense of others. We have a case out here in Salt Lake City, Utah, where a guy's complaining. They show a video of him being attacked after they asked if he was gay. Now, I wasn't there. I haven't seen the whole video, but this whole thing and the climate we have today stinks of a setup. So think about how we can have a pressure valve so every single issue we have doesn't have to be a point of national contention. We really don't need this. I mentioned Heller earlier. I mentioned Heller because, and McDonald, where it was seen as a victory to apply the Second Amendment to the United States, to the states, where also with Heller, Scalia said that the right to keep and bear arms, the Second Amendment confers upon Americans an individual right unconnected with service in the militia. Everybody went, yeah, that's awesome. No, it ain't. And then he also said, what kind of guns are protected by the Second Amendment? Handguns, because they're so popular. Yay, that's freaking awesome. The government can't take our handguns. Yay. What he didn't get, this guy, Mike Hahn, law teacher in law school, said that Scalia was light years ahead of the others in intelligence. So if this guy, the smartest one, screws it up, what are the other ones doing? They're out and out shredding it. So we're seeing bans on assault weapons because they're not protected by the Second Amendment. Accordingly, the federal government can regulate, ban them if they want. We're talking about more assault bans. Trump, by the way, told Feinstein that he'd be amenable to hearing about one. He should have slammed his fist down and said, absolutely, positively not, because candidate Trump said he supported the Second Amendment. People don't understand it's a restriction. Accordingly, what do we have now? House Democrats. Remember, these are the ones that want these background checks. We don't want people getting guns without the background checks. We don't like our gun violence, say the Democrats. How do we prevent it? To have these background checks. What if, however, somebody who is not a United States citizen seeks to purchase one and fails their background check? Well, the Democrats have their hierarchy of importance and victimhood status. During hearings for universal background checks, this is an article from Breitbart, House Democrats rejected a Republican proposal to alert U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, aka ICE, if an illegal alien is discovered via a background check for a firearm. Well, this is how convoluted we are. Jeff, let's break this down into guns and immigration. Does the federal government have the constitutional authority, delegated authority, to regulate firearms at all?
No.
Does the federal government have the constitutionally delegated authority to regulate immigration at all?
No.
Okay.
That'll surprise some of you.
I know. Oh, how can you say that? The federal government has the absolute obligation to protect our borders. And the way to explain this is as follows as we wrap up the show here. Consider this. We have two Americas. We have the United States. These United States, lowercase u, uppercase s, of America, where the general government had limited powers and adequate resources, not unlimited, to pursue their delegated powers. We have the Hamiltonian, which devolved into the Lincolnian America, which now renders the states mere subsidiaries or even counties. In fact, yeah.
Susan, I got to jump in here because there was something said in the chat,
Okay.
and I have to address this before we go. And we're almost out of time. We're almost down to 3 minutes.
Okay.
No, the federal government cannot regulate firearms. That is actually you are absolutely incorrect. I'm sorry to be. I'm not being rude. I'm not attacking you. Read the preamble to the Constitution, or to the preamble to the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights were added as further declaratory and restrictive clauses against the federal government only. So, applying this Bill of Rights properly, the government in Washington, there is not one firearm law that they've ever passed that's constitutional. Every one of them is absolutely forbidden by the Bill of Rights. Sorry, I had to get that out.
Yeah, and was that the commentary of the person they were agreeing, correct, or disagreeing?
No, they were saying that they could regulate them, and that's absolutely incorrect.
No,
they have no authority. It's not delegated. Article 1, Section 8, find firearms regulation in Article 1, Section 8. It's not there. Not there. Go to the 10th Amendment.
Right. Absent the power, the authority to arm the militia, there is no delegated authority to regulate firearms at all. Scalia completely got it wrong. He even admitted, so if you don't believe that the feds have this authority, he even admitted that there was no authority to impose the Second Amendment upon the states. But he said, I'm going to acquiesce anyway. So I would refer anybody that doesn't believe us to read Government by Judiciary by Raoul Berger, outstanding book. Listen to the podcast I mentioned earlier with Kevin Gutzman and Tom Woods. If you want the quick and dirty and absolutely irrefutable version of this story and how it came about, our good friend Dave Benner wrote a book called The 14th Amendment and the Incorporation Doctrine. It is a booklet. It is about 40 pages long. You can read it in an hour. And I think this is the biggest obstacle we have to overcome is this misunderstanding of the role of the federal judiciary. We are out of time. We had so much more to cover, but that's it. We don't have a live show on Friday or Monday, but next week we will be back at it. I want to thank you, Jeff Johnson. I just love doing these shows with you. Want to thank our listeners. Thank you for those who participate. Even if you don't agree with us, stick around, hear us out, hear what we have to say. I'm Suzanne Sherman on behalf of Jeff Johnson and the rest of us at the Cerberus Radio Network. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.